The Colosseum of Aura was old. It was older than most empires in the galaxy. For 10,000 years, blood had been spilled on its sand, and for 10,000 years, crowds had gathered to watch creatures fight and die for their entertainment. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to drink in the light from the three suns that hung in the sky above. The seats rose up in great circles, layer upon layer, until they seemed to touch the clouds themselves. On this day, like every other day, the arena was full. Creatures from 100 different worlds had come to watch the fights. There were with their gray skin and their 6 eyes that could see in every direction at once. There were tall and thin like sticks of dried wood, their bodies covered in scales that changed color with their moods. There were massive and brutal, with 4 arms and armor made of natural bone that grew from their own bodies. And there were dozens of other species, each one stranger than the last, all of them united in their love of violence. High above the arena floor, in a private observation pod that hung from the ceiling like a metal fruit, Commander of the Intelligence Division prepared for another day of work. She was not here for entertainment, she was here to shop. Which meant she looked something like a tall insect standing on 2 legs. Her body was covered in a hard shell the color of dark purple, and her head was dominated by 2 large compound eyes that could see things no human eye could ever perceive. She had 4 arms, each one ending in 3 long fingers that were perfect for operating the complex machines her species had built. 2 small antennae rose from her forehead, twitching slightly as they picked up chemical signals from the air around her. She had been a commander in the Intelligence Division for 30 years, which was not very long by standards. Her species lived for centuries, and she was still considered young by her people. But she had proven herself clever and ruthless, and so she had been given an important job. She was a talent scout. The Dominion was always looking for new weapons, not just machines and ships, but living weapons. Soldiers from other species who could be trained and controlled and sent to fight in wars that they did not want to dirty their own hands with. The gladiatorial pits of Aura were the perfect place to find such weapons. Here, fighters from across the galaxy proved their worth in combat. The strong survived, the weak died, and the watched and chose and bought. Settled into her seat and activated the holographic displays that surrounded her. Numbers and symbols began to flow across the screens, showing her information about every fighter scheduled to appear that day. Heart rates, muscle density, predicted combat outcomes. She had access to more data than most beings could process in a lifetime, and she could read it all at a glance. The first few fights of the day were boring. A warrior defeated a creature from a world she had never heard of. 2 fought each other in a battle that was more dance than combat, their long limbs twisting around each other until one finally managed to break the other's neck. A pack of small predators from a jungle world were released into the arena and promptly killed by a single veteran who barely seemed to notice they were there. Recorded the data but felt no excitement. She had seen all of this before. There was nothing new here, nothing special, nothing worth buying. And then the announcer's voice echoed through the arena, and everything changed. Combatant Designation 742, the voice boomed from speakers hidden in the walls. Species, human. Terra, classification, Category 4, minimal threat assessment. Santini twitched with mild interest. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage. Her species had only made contact with them a few decades ago, and in that time they had not made much of an impression. They were weak by galactic standards. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They could not see in the dark like they could not regenerate lost limbs like they could not shrug off wounds that would kill most other species like Category 4 meant the human was expected to die quickly. It was the lowest classification possible for a gladiator. Such fighters were usually used as warm-up acts, something for the crowd to watch while they waited for the real entertainment to begin. She almost looked away, almost turned her attention to the data scrolling across her screens, waiting for the next fight to be announced. But something made her pause, something about the way the human walked onto the sand. He was not impressive to look at. He was smaller than almost every other species in the arena, standing only about 6 feet tall. His skin was a pale color that spoke of time spent in artificial light rather than under suns. His body was covered in scars, some old and faded, others fresh and pink. He had short brown hair and eyes the color of dark water. According to her files, his name was Danny Cole. The files told her more. He had been captured during a border skirmish in the Outer Rim territories, taken by slavers when his patrol ship was destroyed. He had been sold 3 times before ending up here in the pits of Aura. He had been a soldier once, a member of something called the United Terran Federation Marine Corps. But that was before. Now he was property, a piece of meat to be thrown into the arena for the amusement of others. None of this was unusual. The galaxy was full of such stories, full of beings who had once been free and were now slaves. What was unusual was the way Danny Cole moved. Most new fighters entered the arena with fear written on every part of their body. Their hearts beat too fast. Their muscles trembled. They sweated and shook and sometimes even cried, knowing that death was waiting for them on the sand. Sensors could detect all of these signs, and she had seen them 1,000 times before. Danny Cole showed none of them. His heart rate was elevated, yes, but it was the elevation of someone preparing for exercise, not someone preparing to die. His muscles were loose and ready, not tight with terror. He walked with a measured pace, his eyes moving constantly, taking in every detail of the arena around him. He noted the position of the gates. He studied the texture of the sand beneath his feet. He looked up at the walls and seemed to calculate their height. He was not afraid, he was preparing. Leaned forward in her seat, suddenly very interested indeed. The gate on the opposite side of the arena opened, and Danny Cole's opponent emerged. It was a berserker, and the crowd roared with anticipation. They were one of the most feared warrior species in the galaxy. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in natural armor made of a substance similar to bone but far stronger. They had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their faces were nightmare things, all fangs and small red eyes filled with mindless rage. They lived for battle, bred for it, and they were very, very good at killing. This particular was a champion of the arena, a creature that had killed more than 50 opponents over the past 3 years. Its armor was and pitted from countless fights, and trophies hung from its belt, pieces of bone and scale taken from fallen enemies. It saw the small human standing alone on the sand, and it made a sound that might have been laughter. The rules of this particular fight were simple. The human had been given no weapon. He was classified as prey rather than predator, meant to provide entertainment through his desperate struggle to survive. They had only to catch him and kill him, and then the crowd would cheer, and the next fight would begin. Checked her sensors one more time. Danny Cole's heart rate had increased slightly when they appeared, but it was already stabilizing. His body was producing adrenaline, yes, but in controlled amounts, amounts that would sharpen his senses rather than overwhelm them. That was wrong, that was very wrong. Prey animals did not stabilize when they saw a predator. They panicked, they ran, they died. Danny Cole was doing none of these things. The horn sounded, a deep booming note that echoed off the ancient walls, and the fight began. The charged immediately, as she knew it would. The species was not known for patience or strategy. It relied on speed and power, on overwhelming its opponents before they could react. Its 4 arms spread wide, claws extended, ready to grab the human from any direction he might try to run. Danny Cole did not run. Instead, he moved forward, toward the charging monster, and felt her secondary heart begin to beat in time with her primary one. At the last possible moment, just before the claws could close around him, Danny dropped low and slid across the sand. It was a move that required precise timing, perfect judgment of distance and speed. If he had been a fraction of a second too slow, the claws would have caught him. If he had been a fraction too fast, he would have slid past and been caught by the creature's rear arms. But he was neither too slow nor too fast. He was exactly right. As he passed under his hands reached up and grabbed one of its rear legs, just above what might have been called an ankle. Using the creature's own momentum against it, he twisted his body and stumbled. Its charge became a fall, and it hit the sand hard enough to send up a cloud of dust. The crowd fell silent. This was not how the fight was supposed to go. Sensors were screaming with data. The force required for that maneuver, the precise timing, the anatomical knowledge necessary to identify the exact point on this leg that would cause it to lose balance. None of this matched the Category 4 assessment. None of this matched anything she had seen from a human before. "Computer," she commanded, her voice tight with excitement. "Recalculate threat classification based on observed combat parameters." The computer hummed for a moment, processing the data from her sensors. "Insufficient data for accurate recalculation," it finally replied. "Continuing observation. Preliminary estimate suggests upgrade to Category 3 may be warranted." Category 3. That was the classification given to species that could pose a moderate threat in combat, species that might actually survive more than one fight in the arena. It was still not impressive by galactic standards, but it was a significant upgrade from the minimal threat assessment the human had been given. Had a feeling the computer was still underestimating him. On the arena floor that had recovered from its fall, it rose to its feet, shaking sand from its armor, and turned to face the human with newfound caution. The small creature had surprised it once. It would not be surprised again. Danny Cole stood a few meters away, his body relaxed but ready. Blood was running from a small cut on his shoulder where one of the claws had grazed him during the charge, but he did not seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on his opponent, watching, studying, analyzing. They began to circle, and Danny circled with it. They moved around each other like dancers, each one waiting for the other to make a mistake. The crowd began to murmur, confused by this development. They had come to see a quick kill, not a careful battle. Did not share their confusion. She understood exactly what was happening. The human was learning. She had read reports about human cognition, about the way their minds worked. Unlike most species, which were specialized for certain types of thinking, humans had what scientists called general intelligence. Their brains could adapt to almost any task, could find patterns in almost any kind of information, could learn from almost any experience. It was not a particularly impressive ability compared to the specialized talents of other species, but it was very versatile. Now she was seeing that versatility in action. Danny Cole was watching the way the moved, noting its habits, identifying its weaknesses. He was building a model in his mind, a prediction of what the creature would do next and how he could exploit it. They grew tired of circling. With a roar that shook dust from the walls, it attacked again, all four arms swinging in a complex pattern designed to cover every possible escape route. Danny did not try to escape. Instead, he stepped inside the creature's reach, into the small space between its arms where its claws could not easily reach. It was a dangerous move, reckless even, but it put him exactly where he needed to be. His elbow drove into a spot on this chest, just below where its upper right arm connected to its body. The creature made a sound had never heard before, a high-pitched whine of pain and surprise. Its arm went limp, hanging uselessly at its side. She checked her database quickly. Yes, there it was. A nerve cluster hidden beneath the armor that controlled the upper right arm. The location was listed as theoretical, a potential weakness that had never been confirmed in combat because no one had ever gotten close enough to a living to test it. Danny Cole had just confirmed it. He was not just fighting, he was experimenting. The battle continued, and with each exchange, learned something new about both combatants. There was a creature of instinct and rage, powerful but predictable. It had a dozen different attacks, but it always used them in the same patterns, always responded to certain stimuli in the same ways. Once you understood its patterns, you could predict what it would do next. Danny Cole was the opposite. He never did the same thing twice. Every movement was a test, a question asked with his body and answered with blood. He took hits, absorbed damage that would have crippled most beings, and used each injury as an opportunity to learn something new about his opponent. A claw raked across his ribs, opening a wound that bled freely onto the sand. In return, he learned that the always dropped its left guard slightly when it overextended with its upper arms. Another blow caught him on the shoulder, spinning him around and nearly knocking him down. But as he spun, he saw the way the creature shifted its weight, the momentary weakness in its stance that occurred between one attack and the next. He was mapping it, building a complete picture of every flaw, every vulnerability, every weakness in this defense. And the creature, for all its power and experience, had no idea what was happening. The crowd had fallen completely silent now. Even the dullest spectator could sense that something unusual was occurring. The Category 4 human was still alive, still fighting, still refusing to die the way he was supposed to. 10 minutes passed, then 20. There was breathing heavily now, its chest heaving with exertion. The species was built for short, explosive bursts of violence, not extended combat. Its muscles were starting to cramp, its movements becoming sluggish and imprecise. Danny Cole was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but his eyes were still sharp, and his movements were still economical and precise. He had taken damage, yes, but not the kind of damage that mattered. He had protected his vital organs, his joints, the parts of his body he needed to keep fighting. The wounds he had allowed were superficial, painful, but not debilitating. He had been managing the damage, trading flesh for information. The end came suddenly, as the ends of fights often do. The exhausted and frustrated launched one final desperate attack. It put everything it had into a lunging charge, all four arms extended, claws spread wide to tear the human apart. Danny did not try to dodge. He did not try to slide under the attack like he had at the beginning. Instead, he stepped forward to meet it, moving inside the creature's reach once again, but this time he did not stop with a single strike. His hands found the gaps between the armored plates, the soft places where the bone-like substance did not quite cover the flesh beneath. His fingers dug in, finding purchase, and then he pulled. The sound was wet and horrible. The swore cry became a gurgling scream as something important was torn from its body. Sensors identified it as a secondary respiratory organ, a structure that allowed the species to fuel their muscles with extra oxygen during combat. Without it, they could not sustain the level of exertion its body required. The creature collapsed, drowning in its own fluids, its four arms twitching weakly as its brain struggled to understand what had happened. Danny Cole stood over it, covered in blood both red and green, his chest heaving with exertion but his eyes still clear and focused. The silence in the arena was absolute. 10,000 spectators held their breath, unable to process what they had just witnessed. A Category 4 human, with no weapons and no armor, had just killed a champion with his bare hands. His console lit up with the final threat recalculation. The numbers scrolled across her screen, and she felt something she had not felt in many years. She felt surprised. Category 1, Maximum Threat Assessment, Acquisition Highly Recommended. She leaned back in her seat, her compound eyes fixed on the blood-soaked human standing in the center of the arena. Around her, the crowd was beginning to react, some cheering, others booing, all of them confused by what they had seen. But was not confused. She understood exactly what she was looking at. She had found something rare, something valuable beyond measure. She had found a weapon that could learn, that could adapt, that could transform pain and damage into information, and use that information to destroy enemies that should have been invincible. She had found a human. That combatant should belong to me. she whispered to herself, and she began to make plans. The next several days were busy ones for her. She had many things to arrange, many preparations to make before she could acquire her new prize. First, she needed information. She accessed every database she could reach, pulling files on humans, on their biology, on their history, on their capabilities. Most of what she found was disappointing. Humans were not considered a significant species by the galactic community. They had only been traveling among the stars for a few centuries, a blink of an eye compared to the ancient civilizations that ruled the galaxy. Their technology was primitive, their military power laughable, their influence on galactic affairs practically non-existent. They were classified as a Category 4 species, which meant they were considered a minimal threat, the same classification that had been applied to Danny Cole before his fight with the same classification that had proven so spectacularly wrong. Began to suspect that the classification might be wrong for all humans, not just Danny Cole. She dug deeper into the files, looking for anything that might explain what she had witnessed. She found reports from first contact teams, from trade negotiations, from the few military engagements that had occurred between humans and other species. Most of it was useless, but scattered throughout the data were hints, suggestions of something more. Humans, she learned, came from a world that was actively trying to kill them. This was not unusual in itself. Many species came from dangerous planets. There was a volcanic hellscape where the weak were eaten by the strong from the moment they were born. They evolved on a world covered in acid seas and poisonous atmospheres. The galaxy was full of dangerous places, and the species that survived them were often formidable. But Earth, the human, was different. It was not just dangerous in one or two ways. It was dangerous in every way. The climate changed constantly, shifting from ice ages to periods of warming and back again. The land was plagued by earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, and storms of incredible power. Diseases evolved continuously, each new plague deadlier than the last. Predators stalked every environment, from the depths of the oceans to the heights of the mountains. Even the plants were often toxic, armed with thorns and poisons to protect themselves from being eaten. Humans had survived all of this. They had not just survived, they had thrived. They had spread across every continent on their world, adapting to deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands with equal success. They had conquered every predator, cured every disease, weathered every disaster. And they had done it without any of the natural advantages that other species possessed. No claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom, just their brains and their stubborn refusal to die. Began to understand. Humans were not weak because they lacked natural weapons. They were strong because they had learned to survive without them. Every challenge their world had thrown at them had forced them to adapt, to innovate, to find new solutions to impossible problems. They had been forged by their planet, hammered into shape by billions of years of relentless pressure. They were the ultimate generalists, capable of learning any skill, adapting to any environment, overcoming any obstacle. And when you put one of them in a situation where they had to fight for their life, all of that evolutionary heritage came pouring out. Danny Cole had not beaten them because he was special. He had beaten it because he was human. Updated her files with this new understanding and began to plan her acquisition. The politics of purchasing a gladiator were complicated. The arena masters did not like to sell their best fighters, especially ones who had just provided the most exciting upset in recent memory. The value of Danny Cole had increased dramatically since his victory, and knew she would have to pay a premium to acquire him. But she also knew things that the arena masters did not. She knew that the Dominion was concerned about the humans. Not afraid, not yet, but concerned. The species had shown a disturbing tendency to expand into territories that the Dominion considered its own, and their stubborn refusal to submit to authority had created diplomatic tensions. There had been talk of military action, of putting the humans in their place before they became a real problem. Believed this would be a mistake. She believed that any war with humans would be far more costly than the Dominion's leaders imagined. But she also knew that her beliefs alone would not be enough to change policy. She needed proof. She needed to show the Dominion what humans were really capable of, to demonstrate beyond any doubt that the Category 4 classification was dangerously inaccurate. Danny Cole would be that proof. She watched his next fight from her observation pod, recording every moment with her sensors. He was matched against 3 assassins this time, each one armed with poison blades and trained in the killing arts of their species. The odds were heavily against him. The bookmakers had set his chances of survival at less than 10%. He killed all 3 of them in less than 5 minutes. The first one died when Danny used a piece of broken armor from a previous fight as a throwing weapon, hitting the assassin in one of its 6 eyes and stunning it long enough for him to close the distance. The second died when Danny somehow predicted the pattern of its blade attacks, slipping between the strikes and breaking its neck with a single twist of his arms. The third died trying to flee, its poison blade abandoned on the sand as it scrambled for the safety of the gate. Danny did not let it reach the gate. Recorded everything, nodding the way he had analyzed each opponent's fighting style, the way he had adapted his own technique to counter their strengths, the way he had turned their weapons against them. He was not just a fighter. He was a learning machine, a system that took input in the form of violence and produced output in the form of victory. She watched 3 more fights over the next 2 weeks. In each one, Danny faced odds that should have been impossible to overcome. In each one, he found a way to win. He fought a mind singer, a creature that could reach into the minds of its opponents and twist their thoughts into knots of confusion and despair. Most species lasted only seconds against such an attack before collapsing into helpless madness. Danny lasted nearly a minute, his face twisted with effort as he fought against the mental assault, his feet carrying him forward step by painful step until he was close enough to wrap his hands around this throat. He fought a pack of gene-engineered hunting beasts, creatures designed in a laboratory to be perfect killing machines. They were fast, they were strong, and they worked together with terrifying coordination. Danny used the terrain against them, luring them into narrow passages where their numbers meant nothing, picking them off one by one with improvised weapons and brutal efficiency. He fought another, this one even larger than the first, and he defeated it in half the time. He had learned from the first fight, and the knowledge stayed with him. After each victory, updated her files, adding new data about human capabilities, new observations about their potential. The picture she was building was remarkable. Humans were not just survivors. They were adapters, learners, beings that grew stronger with every challenge they faced. And Danny Cole was an exceptional example of an already exceptional species. The slave auction was held in the lower chambers of the arena complex, where the lighting was dim and the air smelled of old blood and despair. Potential buyers moved between the cells, inspecting the merchandise, making notes on their personal devices. Most of them were looking for cannon fodder, cheap fighters to fill out their collections, or to use in low-stakes matches where the outcome did not matter. Was looking for something more. Danny Cole's cell was at the end of the row, separated from the others by layers of security that had been added after his third escape attempt. Neural inhibitors suppressed his motor functions, keeping him docile and controllable. Energy barriers supplemented the physical bars, humming with enough power to vaporize anything that tried to pass through them. He looked up as she approached, and their eyes met for the first time. Felt a strange sensation run through her body, a kind of electric awareness that she did not immediately recognize. Humans, she reminded herself, were not telepathic. They could not affect the minds of other species through any known mechanism. And yet, something about the way Danny looked at her made her feel as though she was being examined, analyzed, assessed. He was studying her the way he studied his opponents in the arena, He was looking for weaknesses. "You are the one who has been watching me," he said. His voice was rough from disuse, but there was no fear in it. There was no pleading, no desperation, no hope. There was only a calm acknowledgement of fact. "You noticed." She had not meant it as a question, but it came out sounding like one. "Hard not to. You have a distinctive thermal signature, and you always sit in the same spot." He paused, his eyes moving over her body in a way that felt almost intimate. "You are Intelligence Division, if I had to guess. You have been scanning me during every fight, building a profile. You want something from me." Was impressed despite herself. She had thought her observation was discreet, hidden among the thousands of other spectators in the arena. But Danny had noticed her anyway, had tracked her presence across multiple fights, had even deduced her profession from the few clues available to him. This was what humans could do. This was the adaptability that made them so dangerous. "I am Commander," she said, deciding that honesty was the best approach. "And yes, I want something from you. I want to buy your contract." "And do what with me?" "Use you. Your capabilities are wasted here, fighting for the entertainment of crowds. I can offer you something better." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. It was the first expression she had seen from him other than the cold focus of combat. "Better for you, maybe. Better for both of us." She moved closer to the energy barrier, close enough that she could feel the heat of it against her exoskeleton. "I have studied your species extensively over the past few weeks. I know what humans are capable of. And I know that you, Danny Cole, are an exceptional example even among your kind." "I am nothing special," he said, "just stubborn." "That stubbornness is precisely what makes you special." She lowered her voice, conscious of the other buyers moving through the chamber. "Your species has a trait that is very rare in this galaxy. You refuse to accept defeat. You refuse to die when biology and probability both demand it. You take damage that should destroy you and you use it to become stronger. That is not just stubbornness. That is something much more valuable." Danny was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. She could almost see the calculations happening behind them, the assessment of risks and rewards, the evaluation of her words for truth or deception. "What exactly are you offering?" he asked finally. "A position in my division. Training, equipment, resources far beyond anything you could access on your own. Missions that will challenge you, that will push you to the limits of your capabilities and beyond. And perhaps, eventually, your freedom." "My freedom." He said the words as though they were unfamiliar to him, as though he had forgotten what they meant. "You are offering me freedom in exchange for service." "I am offering you a chance to prove your worth. The Dominion rewards those who serve it well. If you perform as I expect you to perform, your contract will be voided within a decade. You will be free to go wherever you wish, do whatever you want. That is more than most slaves in this galaxy can hope for." "And if I refuse?" Shrugged, a gesture she had learned from studying human body language. "Then you will stay here, fighting in the arena until you eventually lose. No fighter wins forever, Danny Cole. Sooner or later, you will face an opponent you cannot defeat, and then you will die on the sand for the entertainment of strangers. Is that how you want your story to end?" Another long silence. Waited patiently, knowing that the human needed time to process the offer, to weigh his options, to make his decision. She had faith in her analysis. She believed she understood what motivated him, what drove him to fight so hard, what made him so determined to survive. She was about to find out if she was right. "Why me?" Danny asked. "There are other humans in the pits, stronger ones probably, smarter ones definitely. Why go to all this trouble for me?" "Because I watched you fight," said. "I analyzed every movement, every decision, and what I saw was not just a warrior. I saw a weapon that improves itself with every use, a weapon that learns from pain, that adapts to any threat, that refuses to break no matter how much damage it takes." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You are not just stubborn, Danny Cole. You are indomitable, and that is the rarest trait in the galaxy. For the first time since she had begun watching him, Danny Cole smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator that had finally found prey worthy of its attention. "When do we start?" he asked. The auction itself was a formality. Outbid every other interested party within minutes, paying a sum that would have purchased a small warship. The arena masters were pleased with the sale, unaware that they were giving up something far more valuable than they could imagine. Danny Cole's contract was transferred to the intelligence division, and his new life began. The journey to Prime took several weeks, during which time began the process of integrating her new acquisition into the division's operations. She started with medical examinations, conducted by the best doctors in the Dominion. They poked and prodded Danny, scanned his body with every instrument available, took samples of his blood and tissue, and analyzed them down to the molecular level. What they found confirmed everything had suspected. Human biology was not impressive by galactic standards. Their muscles were weaker than those of most warrior species. Their bones were brittle compared to natural armor. Their senses were mediocre at best. On paper, they should have been one of the least threatening species in the galaxy. But the doctors found other things that did not show up on standard threat assessments. They found that human muscles could, under extreme stress, operate far beyond their normal limits. The neurological systems that usually prevented humans from hurting themselves could be in moments of crisis, allowing them to access reserves of strength they normally could not touch. They found that human bones, while relatively fragile, could heal stronger than before after being broken. Each injury made the bone denser, harder, more resistant to future damage. They found that the human immune system was aggressive enough to fight off infections that would kill most other species within hours. And more than that, the immune system learned from each infection, becoming more effective against similar threats in the future. They found that the human brain was not optimized for any single function. Instead, it was a general-purpose processing system of staggering complexity, capable of learning almost anything, adapting to almost any situation, solving almost any problem given enough time and motivation. "They are designed to survive," the chief medical officer told, wonder evident in her voice. "Not to excel at any one thing, but to survive anything. Their entire biology is built around persistence, around enduring damage and coming back stronger. I have never seen anything like it." Nodded, unsurprised by the findings. "They evolved on a death world," she said, "a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill them. This is the result." "Yes, but how?" The doctor pulled up a holographic display of human DNA, a spiral of genetic code that glowed in the dim light of her office. "Most species that evolve on dangerous worlds become specialized. They develop armor or speed or venom or some other specific adaptation to deal with the specific threats they face. But humans develop nothing specific. They develop the ability to develop. They made adaptability itself into their primary survival trait." "And what does that mean for our purposes?" The doctor was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "It means he will get better," she said finally. "Whatever training you put him through, whatever challenges you throw at him, he will adapt. He will learn. He will improve. And there is no clear upper limit to how much he can improve. Other species hit a ceiling, a point beyond which they cannot develop further. Humans might not have such a ceiling." "Might not. We do not have enough data to be certain. Humans are still a relatively new species in galactic terms. They have not had time to fully explore their own potential." The doctor looked at with an expression that might have been fear or might have been admiration. "If I were you, Commander, I would be very careful with this one. He may become more than you bargained for." Considered this warning and filed it away for future reference. Then she began planning Danny Cole's training program. The facility she chose was located on a remote moon orbiting Prime. It was used by the intelligence division for special projects, the kind of projects that required isolation and secrecy. The kind of projects that sometimes produced results that the rest of the Dominion was not ready to see. Danny arrived in chains, standard procedure for new acquisitions, but had the restraints removed as soon as they were through the security checkpoints. He rubbed his wrists where the metal had chafed his skin and looked around the facility with the same analytical gaze he had used in the arena. "Impressive," he said. "How many people have died here?" Blinked, surprised by the question. "What makes you think anyone has died here?" "The smell." He took a deep breath through his nose, his nostrils flaring. "Blood leaves traces that are hard to remove completely. This place smells like a slaughterhouse that has been cleaned too many times." She had not known that humans could detect such things. She added another note to her growing file on human capabilities. "You are correct," she admitted. "This facility has been used for training exercises that sometimes resulted in casualties. The program I have designed for you will be similarly dangerous. Some elements may be lethal if you fail to perform adequately." "Good," Danny smiled that predator smile again. "I would not want to be bored." The training began the next day. Started with combat simulations, putting Danny against holographic recreations of every major species in the Dominion's database. He fought virtual creatures from worlds so distant that their light had not yet reached human eyes. He won most of the simulations, and when he lost, he analyzed his failures and tried again. He lost less and less often as the weeks went by. She moved on to weapons training, introducing Danny to technologies that humans had never seen. Energy weapons that could vaporize flesh at a distance. Blades that vibrated at frequencies designed to cut through armor. Explosives that could level buildings or take out individual targets with surgical precision. He learned to use them all with disturbing speed, his general purpose brain absorbing the new skills like a sponge absorbing water. She added psychological conditioning, exercises designed to harden his mental defenses against the kinds of attacks he might face in the field. Mindsingers were not the only species capable of psychic assault. There were others, some of them far more dangerous, and Danny needed to be able to resist them all. He struggled with this training more than the others, the invisible battles inside his head leaving him exhausted and sometimes shaking, but he never gave up. He never stopped trying. And through it all she watched him adapt to each new challenge, growing stronger and more capable with every passing day. She watched his muscles grow denser, his reflexes grow faster, his mind grow sharper. She watched him transform from a talented fighter into something approaching a perfect weapon. She also watched something else happen, something she had not anticipated. She watched herself beginning to care about him. It started small. A moment of concern when a training exercise went wrong and Danny was injured. A flicker of pride when he mastered a technique that had taken other operatives months to learn. A strange feeling of companionship when they sat together reviewing the day's data, discussing strategies and comparing analyses. She told herself it was just professional interest. She was invested in his success because his success reflected well on her. She cared about his well-being because damaged assets were less useful than healthy ones. There was nothing more to it than that. But the feelings grew stronger as the weeks turned into months, and she began to wonder if she was lying to herself. Humans, she knew, were social creatures. They formed bonds with those around them, connections that influenced their behavior and motivated their actions. It was another survival adaptation, a way of ensuring that the group would protect its members and the members would sacrifice for the group. In the brutal calculus of evolution, cooperation was often more effective than competition. Had she somehow become part of Danny's group? Had he, without either of them realizing it, formed one of those human bonds with her? And if he had, what did that mean for their professional relationship? She pushed the questions aside. There would be time to address them later. For now, the training had to continue. The deadline she had set was approaching, and Danny Cole was almost ready for his first real mission. Almost ready to show the Dominion what a human could do. The briefing took place in his private office, a small room deep in the facility where they could speak without fear of being overheard. Danny sat across from her, his body relaxed but his eyes alert, waiting for her to begin. "Your first mission," she said, pulling up a holographic display. An image appeared, showing a face that even Danny recognized. Lord Warlord controls approximately 30% of the independent slave trade in this sector. His death would destabilize the market and create opportunities for Dominion expansion. Danny studied the image, his expression unreadable. "You want me to kill him? I want you to demonstrate what a human can do when properly motivated and equipped." She expanded the display, showing the layout of his fortress. He is heavily protected. His personal guard consists of over 200 warriors, all of them veterans. His fortress is equipped with the latest security systems, and he never leaves his inner sanctum without an escort of at least 12 elite bodyguards. Sounds challenging. It should be impossible. Every other operative we have sent against him has failed. Most of them died. A few were captured and are now, presumably, wishing they had died instead. She leaned forward, fixing Danny with a direct stare. "I believe you can succeed where they failed. I believe you are the weapon we have been looking for." Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised her. "Why him?" "I told you, he controls the slave trade. His death would benefit the Dominion." "That is the official reason. What is the real reason?" Hesitated. She had not planned to tell him, had not thought it was relevant to the mission. But something about the way he looked at her, the directness of his gaze, made her want to be honest. "He has been raiding human colonies," she said. "For the past 5 years, his ships have been taking humans from the outer rim territories and selling them into slavery. Thousands of your people have passed through his hands." She paused, watching for his reaction. "Including, according to our records, a young woman named Lucy Cole, your sister." Danny's face did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A light that had not been there before, cold and hard and dangerous. "She died on 4, he said. "It was not a question." "Yes, 6 months after she was sold. Radiation exposure from the mining operations." Felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she did not immediately recognize. "I am sorry. I did not know until recently when I reviewed your complete file." "Would it have changed anything if you had known earlier?" "No," she admitted. "I still would have recruited you. I still would have trained you. The mission would still need to be completed." "Then why tell me now?" "Because I thought you deserved to know. Because I thought it might affect your motivation." She met his eyes, trying to read what was happening behind them. "And because I thought you might want to make this personal." Danny nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already suspected. Then he reached out and took the mission briefing from her hands, his fingers brushing against hers for just a moment. "What is my equipment budget?" he asked. "Unlimited." That predator smile appeared again, but this time there was something different about it. Something colder. Something that made even feel a chill run through her exoskeleton. "Then Lord is already dead," Danny Cole said. "He just does not know it yet."